My beloved child, do not scroll past this moment too quickly, because something has just come into the light that was never supposed to reach them this way. Something you did quietly, something you never announced, something you never used to make yourself look important, has finally been discovered. And the person whose heart has been connected to yours in ways neither of you has fully understood is sitting with a truth that has changed the way they see you. Pause here for a moment. There are discoveries that make people smile, discoveries that make them question everything, and discoveries that leave them completely silent because suddenly the past looks different. This is the third kind. Your soulmate has just learned that there was a moment when you protected them without asking for recognition, without waiting for gratitude, and without ever planning to tell them what you had done. What they discovered was not simply an act of kindness. It revealed something about your heart they had been trying to understand for a very long time. You thought that moment had disappeared into the past. You believed no one needed to know. Perhaps that was the entire reason you remained silent. There are people who do good things because they want their goodness witnessed, and then there are souls who quietly stand between someone they care about and something that could hurt them, then walk away before anyone can say thank you. You were not trying to become the hero of their story. You were not trying to create a debt they would someday have to repay. You simply saw something they did not see, understood something they did not yet understand, and made a choice. You protected their peace. You protected their dignity. You protected something precious around them while allowing them to believe everything had simply worked itself out. But now a piece of that hidden story has surfaced, and what makes this moment so powerful is not merely what you did. It is the reason you never told them. They found out almost accidentally. That is what has shaken them most. This was not you confessing your sacrifice. You did not appear before them saying, "Look what I did for you." You did not send a message hoping they would finally appreciate you. The truth reached them through another doorway. A conversation. A forgotten detail. Someone remembering what happened. A sentence spoken casually that was never meant to carry such weight. At first your soulmate did not understand what they were hearing. They thought perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. Then another detail emerged. And another. Suddenly the pieces began connecting, and the person telling the story had no idea that every sentence was rearranging something inside your soulmate's heart. There was a moment when they became unusually quiet. Imagine that silence, my child. Not an empty silence, but the kind filled with memories. They began returning mentally to a chapter they thought they understood. They remembered what was happening around them then. They remembered their confusion. They remembered how certain circumstances suddenly shifted. Something that could have become painful never reached them in its full force. A situation that might have embarrassed them somehow softened. A conversation that could have turned against them changed direction. Perhaps they had once called it luck. Perhaps they thought circumstances had simply changed. Perhaps they even believed someone else deserved the credit. They never knew there had been a quiet heart standing somewhere beyond their awareness saying, in its own way, let this stop here. They do not need to carry this. And now they know. But there is something even deeper beginning to trouble them. They are asking themselves why you never told them. That question has become more powerful than the discovery itself. If you had wanted praise, there were countless opportunities to mention it. If you had wanted leverage over their emotions, you could have reminded them whenever things became difficult between you. If you had wanted to prove that you cared more than they did, you possessed evidence. Yet you said nothing. You allowed them to misunderstand certain things. You even allowed them, perhaps, to underestimate how deeply you cared. And that realization has touched a place inside them that dramatic declarations could never reach. There is a reason quiet love can be more powerful than loud affection. Words can be beautiful, but words can also be prepared. Gestures performed in front of an audience can be impressive, but sometimes the truest measure of someone's heart is what they choose when no one is watching. Your soulmate is confronting that distinction now. They are remembering the times they questioned you. They are remembering moments when they wondered whether you truly cared. They are remembering occasions when your silence seemed like distance. What they could not see was that your silence was not always absence. Sometimes your silence was protection. Sometimes you were carrying knowledge you refused to weaponize. Sometimes you were choosing their peace over your opportunity to look good. This discovery has made them revisit one particular memory more than the others. They remembered something you said long ago, something that seemed ordinary at the time. Maybe it was a simple reassurance. Maybe you told them not to worry. Maybe you said everything would eventually settle. They heard those words then without knowing what stood behind them. Today those same words sound completely different. They realize you may already have known what was happening. You may already have made a choice that helped keep the situation from reaching them. And suddenly that old memory has become almost unbearable in its tenderness, because they can now hear what you did not say. You never said, "I fixed this." You never said, "You owe me." You never said, "Remember what I sacrificed." You simply let them continue. And there is another layer they have not yet fully processed. Protecting someone does not always mean confronting an enemy or dramatically rescuing them from something visible. Sometimes protection is refusing to repeat something that would humiliate them. Sometimes it is defending their character when they are not present. Sometimes it is quietly correcting a false impression. Sometimes it is taking the heavier burden because you know the other person is already carrying enough. Sometimes it is refusing to expose a vulnerability even after the relationship becomes complicated. And sometimes protection means having information powerful enough to hurt someone and deliberately deciding that love will not use it. Your soulmate has realized that whatever happened, you had an opportunity to choose yourself. You could have protected your image. You could have stepped aside. You could have said, "This is not my problem." Instead, something inside you refused to abandon them in that moment. Even if they never knew. Even if they never thanked you. Even if you would receive absolutely nothing in return. That is the detail they cannot escape. They have begun wondering how many other things they never noticed. And that question is opening doors they were not prepared to open. What if there were other moments when you cared quietly? What if some of the things they interpreted as indifference were actually restraint? What if they judged your heart according to what you displayed while your deepest loyalty was happening where they could not see it? Your soulmate is not merely reconsidering one event now. They are reconsidering you. There is emotion rising inside them, but it is complicated. Gratitude is there, yes, but so is regret. Not destructive regret, not something meant to punish them, but the uncomfortable realization that perhaps they formed conclusions before possessing the whole story. They remember moments when they wanted you to prove yourself. They remember expecting grand gestures. They remember wondering why you did not fight louder for their attention. Yet now they have discovered that while they were waiting for visible proof, invisible proof had already been given. And it cost you something. That part has only just surfaced. You see, my child, what they first heard sounded like a simple act of protection. But as the conversation continued, they realized your choice had required you to give something up. Perhaps it was your reputation in someone's eyes. Perhaps you accepted blame you could have redirected. Perhaps you lost an opportunity. Perhaps you kept a confidence that would have made your own position easier if revealed. Whatever form it took, your silence was not free. There was a cost attached to it, and you paid that cost without sending them the bill. Your soulmate asked a question when they understood this. Why didn't they ever tell me? The answer they received was simple. Because they didn't want you to feel like you owed them. That sentence changed the atmosphere. For several seconds, your soulmate had nothing to say. There are moments when the heart recognizes something before the mind can organize it. This was one of those moments. Something inside them softened immediately, because suddenly they were not hearing a story about someone trying to win them. They were hearing a story about someone who had cared for them even when there was no guarantee of being chosen. And that difference matters. Your soulmate has encountered affection before. They have heard promises. They have experienced people being kind when kindness benefited them. They know what attention feels like. But secret protection touches a different place in the human heart because it raises a frighteningly beautiful question. What kind of person protects me when they know I may never find out? They are asking that question about you now. The answer is making them emotional. They are beginning to understand that some of your greatest expressions of care may have been the things you deliberately kept invisible. There were moments when you could have exposed someone and did not. Moments when you could have repeated private words and chose silence. Moments when your own feelings were hurt, yet you refused to destroy their dignity in retaliation. You understood something that many people learn only after losing someone precious. If love becomes a weapon the moment it is disappointed, perhaps it was never love in its deepest form. But your soulmate is about to discover something they have not yet been told. The person who revealed the first part of the story does not know everything. Someone else does. Someone who witnessed what happened from another angle has carried a missing detail all this time. And that detail changes the meaning of your sacrifice completely. Before that revelation arrives, however, your soulmate is going through memories one by one. They remember your face during certain conversations. They remember moments when you seemed as though you wanted to say more but stopped yourself. They remember how you sometimes changed the subject when they asked questions about that period. At the time, they may have assumed you were avoiding honesty. Now they wonder whether you were protecting them even from the weight of knowing what you had done. This has created a strange ache in their chest. They wish they could return to one particular moment. There was a day when you needed understanding too. You were carrying something quietly, but because they did not know the truth, they could not recognize the weight behind your eyes. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they misunderstood your mood. Maybe they thought your silence meant you were pulling away. Today they would respond differently. Today they would look at you longer. Today they would ask another question. Today they would say, "You don't always have to be strong around me." But time does not move backward. It reveals. And sometimes revelation is more powerful than repetition because it gives people the opportunity to choose differently going forward. Your soulmate is approaching that choice now. They are realizing that knowing what you did creates responsibility, not a debt to you, but a responsibility to become more honest with themselves. They can no longer pretend they do not understand your heart. They can no longer judge your feelings only by the moments when you were expressive. Something hidden has become evidence. Yet there is one thing frightening them slightly. They wonder whether you still care in that same quiet way. They wonder whether too much time has passed. They wonder whether their misunderstanding changed something inside you. And perhaps most painfully, they wonder whether they discovered the truth too late to respond to it. Do not allow that thought to make you anxious, my child. This story is not unfolding to make you chase anyone. It is not calling you to prove yourself again. What was done from a sincere heart does not need to become a performance afterward. Your worth is not dependent upon whether another person finally recognizes what you gave. The beauty of your action existed before anyone applauded it. The purity was in the fact that you did not require an audience. This is why the discovery carries so much weight. Had you announced it immediately, perhaps they would have thanked you and moved forward. But because the truth remained hidden, time tested your motives. You had days when you could have revealed it. You had moments of frustration when bringing it up might have helped your argument. You had opportunities to say, "After everything I've done for you," yet you resisted. That restraint became part of the story. And now your soulmate knows it. They have started comparing what they discovered about you with something else happening around them today. Someone recently tried very hard to impress them. Someone made sure every good gesture was noticed. Someone wanted recognition for the smallest effort. Normally your soulmate might not have thought much about it. But after learning about you, the contrast became impossible to ignore. One person was asking to be seen. You had done something meaningful while accepting the possibility of remaining unseen. Your soulmate felt the difference immediately. This does not mean they are placing you on a pedestal. You are human within this story. You have made mistakes. You have had emotional moments. You have misunderstood things too. But perhaps that makes this revelation even more powerful. Perfect people do not exist. What matters is what someone chooses when love becomes inconvenient. You were given a moment when protecting them brought you no visible reward, and you still chose protection. Something inside your soulmate whispered, "I didn't know." Then another thought followed. What else don't I know? That question has become the doorway to what happens next. Because there is more. The hidden event was larger than they currently understand. They believe you protected them from one situation, but your decision may have prevented a chain of consequences. One choice changed another choice. One conversation prevented another conversation. One moment of restraint protected something they still value today. Your soulmate is about to realize that the life they remember from that period might have unfolded very differently had you chosen resentment instead of compassion. They have begun asking for details. Not gossip. Not drama. Details. What exactly happened? Who knew? When did they decide to do that? Did they know what it would cost them? And then came the question that made the person speaking hesitate. Did they ever say why? There was a pause. Your soulmate noticed it. That pause told them the answer mattered. The person eventually said that you had given a reason, but it was not the reason your soulmate expected. You had not said, "Because I want them to love me." You had not said, "Because maybe someday they will choose me." You had not even said, "Because they would do the same for me." Your reason was quieter. You had said something about them deserving peace even if you were never part of that peace. When your soulmate heard this, something inside them broke open. Not in fear. In recognition. Because there are sentences that expose the architecture of a heart, and that sentence exposed yours. You were not trying to own their future. You wanted them protected inside it. Even if that future did not include you. Your soulmate looked away when they heard this. They needed a moment because suddenly their own memories became emotional. They remembered all the times they feared love would become possession. They remembered people whose affection came with invisible contracts. They remembered promises that later became demands. And now, unexpectedly, they were learning that somewhere in their own story there had been someone who chose their well-being without attaching a condition. You. But there is still something your soulmate does not understand. Your protection was not completely invisible. Someone saw you. Someone watched you make the decision. Someone saw what happened immediately afterward. And that person has never forgotten. For a long time, they believed it was not their story to tell. They respected your silence because they understood why you wanted the moment buried. But circumstances have changed, and now the truth is beginning to surface without your permission, not to embarrass you, but because hidden things sometimes become necessary pieces of another person's understanding. Your soulmate is about to hear from that witness. And what this witness remembers will explain something your soulmate has wondered about for a long time, why you suddenly became quieter after that period. They thought you lost interest. They thought your feelings changed. They thought perhaps someone else had entered your heart. But none of those explanations were entirely true. You became quieter because protecting them required you to carry something you could not explain without revealing what you had promised yourself would remain secret. You chose silence, and your silence was misunderstood. That misunderstanding created distance. Distance created questions. Questions created assumptions. And assumptions changed the course of your connection. Your soulmate is seeing that chain clearly for the first time. This is why their discovery today feels so much bigger than a sweet story about something kind you once did. It has become a missing chapter. It explains behavior they never understood. It answers questions they stopped asking. It reveals that a moment they interpreted as withdrawal may actually have been the aftermath of sacrifice. And now they are wondering what might have happened if they had known then what they know today. But something even more unexpected is happening. They are not only thinking about the past. They are thinking about reaching toward the future. There is a message forming inside them. They have considered writing it more than once. They begin, stop, erase, begin again. What do you say when someone protected you and never expected you to know? Thank you suddenly feels too small. Why didn't you tell me? Feels almost unfair because they are beginning to understand exactly why. They want to ask whether you remember. Of course you remember. Some choices leave marks on the person who makes them even when no one else sees. They want to tell you they know now. But before they do, they need one final piece of the story. And that piece is already moving toward them. The witness has agreed to speak. Your soulmate does not yet know what they are about to hear. They think the biggest revelation has already happened. They think discovering your secret protection was the entire truth. It was not.